Hi, I'm Cheryl Belson with American Sewing Guild, and I am thrilled to be joined today with Ann Williamson for a new episode of Fireside Chats. Ann has a background in painting and drawing, but that background laid the foundation for her current medium of choice, which is fabric. She creates garments incorporating all sorts of hand sewing techniques such as beading and applique and piecing. And her collection of vintage Japanese kimono silks is fabulous, and it takes center stage as she combines pieces from different folds to create stunning new designs. Ann, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. This is really exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I have been too. I have followed you for some time. Another member in our Plano chapter introduced me to you, and ever since she did, I've just loved watching and seeing what you create. It's very inspiring.
Well, thanks. That's great.
Well, I always like to start these chats by hearing more about how people started and how they made their journey to where they are today. So I understand that after you got your art degree, you immediately went from the West Coast, Portland, Oregon, to the East Coast, New York, with the intention of painting, but
not quite.
Oh, okay, tell me.
So I finished, I focused on painting and drawing in college, but by the last few years, I was making textile art. So I was painting, dyeing, piecing, appliquing pieces for the wall. We called them wall hangings in those days.
Okay.
After college, I put together a group of pieces for the local gallery here in Portland, the Contemporary Craft Gallery, and had an exhibit. After that, I naively thought, I'll go to New York and I'll become famous. So I went there with all my work, pictures. I tried to get interviews in these galleries. They were not interested at all. It's a cruel world, the New York City art scene. However, I also, almost as an afterthought, brought some clothes that I had made and went to Julie Artisan's gallery, the premier art to wear gallery in the country, which was up on the Upper East Side on Madison Avenue. And I went there and she welcomed me with open arms. It was a wonderful introduction to her and her gallery. It was a very small space. It had 2 windows and this long, narrow space, but it was right on Madison Avenue. And what she would do is have an exhibit of your work in the window on Madison Avenue with your name and my pieces. So every 6 months for quite a few years, I would send her a group of pieces and then she would show them to the city of New York. And, they would sell. And it was wonderful. She was fabulous support. I just, to this day, love her. The gallery has closed since then, but she really got me going. Then I kind of shifted over simultaneously into the craft show world and started selling at the various craft shows around the country.
Okay.
Including through the American Craft Council, and the Smithsonian has a fundraiser. The Philadelphia Museum of Art has one, and there's a few scattered around. So I kind of shifted into that, and that's what I do now.
And now, are all of these, what is the wording? Is it juried?
Juried craft shows. They are juried. A few are invitation, but most of them, you send in 5 images and then they determine whether or not you are worthy to exhibit at their show.
Wow. Well, that is really, really interesting. Well, I've heard you describe your design style as clean, classic, but special and unusual. And I love that description. You've given me a little 90-second video that highlights your work. So I'd like to show that now, and then we'll come back and talk some more.
Okay, sounds good.
Those pieces are amazing, Anne. I love seeing every one of them. Can you talk about the design process that you use to develop that work?
Well, it's based on what I prefer in clothing, which is something comfortable that you can wear. There's nothing poking you. You don't have to keep adjusting as things slip off. It's easy to wear. It's comfortable, simple shapes, but with embellishment on to give kind of interest and activity. Um, I piece, I applique, and I bead. And the way my process works is I have so many different variations that I'm following. So I'll make one piece and I like one aspect of it, but I want to see what it would be like if I changed it slightly in this way and then made it in a slightly different shape. And then I'll kind of follow that train. Or I'll have a photograph that I'll have that I like the colors or some of the shapes that I see in it. And then I can follow that line of thought. Sometimes I'll do a very elaborate drawing because I know where I want to go with something. I'll have an idea. I'll think, oh, I'd love to make something that looks like you're standing on the hillside in Renaissance Italy. And I'll make a drawing up like that. And other times I'll just have a beautiful piece of fabric and I'll want to make it up into something. I just want to really show that fabric off as much as I can. So it's a lot of different tracks kind of following as I kind of follow my nose along, just finding my way that way.
Wow. Wow. It sounds like quite a process and very much an artistic process.
Yeah, it feels like that. It feels like that for sure.
How do you marry the artistic side where you're creating that beautiful design with the construction side where sleeves have to go in and collars have to go on?
Right. Exactly. And my first pieces didn't always pay attention to that. So, but as the years have gone by, I'm always thinking things like, you want more emphasis maybe up around your face rather than maybe in a spot you don't want to highlight so much. I also have my pattern pieces and I'll lay out my design on my pattern pieces so I can kind of see how things are going to placement will be. This is a good example of that. This is my trench coat design this is a pattern piece here and this is a pattern piece. So I pieced these sections together. I laid them out on the pattern piece to see how they would fit together. Okay. And then I worked on the whole thing at the same time. So it's just making sure things line up properly and there's flow, there's a design flow. It's not all red here and a piece of white here. It's kind of, for this one, I wanted the colors to cover the whole surface. So your eye kind of dances around. Yeah. This is also made with my scraps, leftover pieces, which anyone who sews, we know how much we have leftover scraps. So I do a series of pieces that are all my little remainders. That would be an example of that. So when I'm seeing like the little
red triangle and the black going to white triangle, those are independent pieces?
Yes, each color is a separate piece of fabric. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's beautiful. I absolutely love it. Love it. Well, you frequently use fabric strips. I've seen many of your designs that have fabric strips. And you even did an article for Threads back in February of 2012 about the approach you use with incorporating fabric strips. And I love seeing how you incorporate all these strips, and you have little squares, and you just do all kinds of things. I love that. So can you talk about how you go through that part of the process?
Right. So this one is an example of that technique. I kept wanting to make lines almost like a pencil or an ink line. I wanted to make them skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. And I came up with this technique where I start with a bias strip of silk organza. I fold it in half and sew along the edge, and then I turn it inside out.
Do you have a standard size, or do they just whatever you feel like?
I cut it out of.
I mean, is it like almost always 1 inch, or is it just whatever width you feel like?
Well, I like to make them pretty narrow. I can't, if I make them more narrower than 5/8, I can't really sew them. So about 5/8.
Okay.
And 3/4 in there. I use a tapestry needle. Can you see it? This is my technical tool that I use. It's got a blunt tip, and I turn the tube inside out.
Okay.
And I iron it flat. So it's kind of like linguine. So, and then I have these. I end up with these little strips, bias tubes that are pretty skinny.
Yeah.
A shiny one.
Yeah, that's very skinny.
Then I lay them, I pin them to my board onto the fabric that I'm going to be sewing them to. And then I pin them in place. And these have been pinned, and then I baste them in place. And here this one is basted. So it's ready to hand stitch. And I do a little tiny slip stitch all the way along each one, down the middle.
Wow. And always by hand.
Yes, because it keeps it soft. If I tried to machine stitch it, it would be too stiff, I think.
Okay.
And not as accurate.
Okay.
I do it. You want to know the secret? I do it at night and watch television and watch The Crown or The Queen's Gambit. And so it keeps me busy while I'm watching TV.
Perfect. Oh, that's amazing. Sounds like a lot of work.
I enjoy it. So it's not work. It's fun. I always say it keeps me off the streets and out of the bars.
So now you just showed us that piece where you had all of the strips already on there, but that wasn't cut out into a shape like a garment pattern piece shape yet, right?
It is. This one is. Yes. You can see it's.
Oh, okay. All right. So you're doing it directly onto the fabric that you're going to create the garment from at this point.
Yes. So I know exactly where the design is going to be going. And, for example, under the arm, I often leave it a little less elaborate work because your arm's going to be covering it.
Sure. Wow. Very, very beautiful. Beautiful stuff. So,
do you want to see the one that's finished?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Well, this is finished, ready to be sewn into a jacket. So this is this one with all these strips.
Wow. So many strips. Wow.
Yeah.
And now the one that you showed us before was on, it looked like organza. Is that sort of like a test piece, or do you put it on organza and then put it over the other fabric?
This is a Japanese kimono silk that is
Oh,
what they use for their summer wear. They still line it, but it's just slightly less heavy. And I don't know if you can see, but it has this wonderful wave design in it.
yeah. Oh, wow. That's fabulous.
Isn't it?
Yes. That really is fabulous. I love that. I just thought it was organza because it was so sheer. And
yeah, no, it's a little more structure than organza.
Okay.
But it's kind of the same idea.
Yeah. Wow. I can't wait to see what that turns into.
Yes, me too.
Still a work in progress.
Exactly. Oh. It's going to go over a brocade that I have. And if you want to go see the in process, I have a blog post about it on my website. I do have a number of in process. My blog is about what I've been doing. So if I finish something, I'll show that. But a lot of times it's I'm in the middle of something, so I can show how I got to that point.
Yeah, that's what I love about your blog. There is, remember, one of my favorites, we didn't talk beforehand about this, but one of my favorites is in progress that you shared with these little tiny turquoise squares.
Yes.
There's a bazillion of these little tiny turquoise squares.
I have a jacket that shows those little squares. Oops, there's the.
Yeah. That is, I love that. I love that. And this particular with the turquoise squares, you ended up having them they were just like everywhere. It was fabulous. I loved that. But that's one of the things I like about your work is that you incorporate all these different things, and there's always a sense of motion in your garment.
Yeah, to keep your eye interested. So there's some sort of composition that's keeping something happening, even if it's kind of rest. But I love the dynamic aspect of, like this one with all these swirling applications.
Oh. Well, you talked about your shows and expos that your juried shows, all of that. So it seems like from what you told us earlier that is a significant part of your business. And with a year like 2020, when COVID hits and shows are canceled, I'm wondering, how did you pivot? What did you do? Were you able to pivot?
Yes, so I did two separate things. One was I started making pieces that were much more elaborate and took much more time and involved a lot more handwork. I allowed myself the opportunity to sit and think more and make changes if I wanted to. I just dove deep. And one of the first ones I did make was this one, which I call disruption, because I felt like that's what happened with COVID. And it's all about this plaid structure, and on top of it is just chaos, where everything fell apart. So that was one I did. And then some of these other ones I'm showing you I have other ones in process. I have this, I have one that's beaded that I'm working on that's taking forever. I don't know if you can see it very well, but I'm beading between all the seams.
Okay.
White on white. So there's that aspect of it. I'm just taking advantage of all the time. Instead of having a show that's coming in a month and I need to quickly make a lot of things for it, I have all the time in the world. So there's that. The second thing that I did was my web shop. I have a website, and I had a shop, which was to tell you the truth, was kind of almost an afterthought. I always had things there, but I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. Well, now I thought, well, this is a perfect opportunity to learn more about how to try to make sales through my web shop. So I did that. I had put an ad in the American Craft magazine, and I've been sending out email blasts to people on my email list. And what is selling? What can you buy online that fits no matter what? A scarf. So I've been making scarves, more scarves. I always made them, but I've been making even more, which use up my scraps, are really fun to make. Anyone who's a quilter knows how much fun it is to combine fabric and color together. And they're actually pretty quick. So I'm doing this two separate things. One is very labor intensive and time consuming, and the other is done within a day or two. So it's an interesting combination of quick and slow, back and forth.
Now, are those scarves made with your silk kimono?
Yes, these are all my remainder pieces. So these are fabrics that have been, again, we all have lots of leftovers, and these fabrics are too amazing to throw away. So even these tiny little pieces like this, I mean, look at that. Somebody with a paintbrush made that. Yeah. And so I've got piles of scraps. I have piles of pieces. I've got like 4 lifetimes worth of fabric here. And then I've got all the scraps that come from that work.
And now your primary fabric of choice is that kimono fabric, right?
Yes. Yes. For years, I was looking for a fabric that had body so that I could piece it, applique, bead it, but still had drape and softness. And I went to a secondhand store here in Portland, and there was some kimonos, and I looked at them and I knew what the fabric was. It was this gorgeous ikat and stencils and hand painted, beautiful weaves. So I started investigating, and I found a company, an online company, which alas has gone out of business, although I'm going to be fine. And I've just been buying fabric from them for quite a while. And so again, it's got this beautiful drape. You saw this interesting sheer fabric, this ikat design. I put the little squares on it, but it's all ikat. And my theory is, in the West, we went through so many different styles all the time. We went big and puffy and little and skinny and big bustle and low cut. Whereas in Japan, it was the basic kimono shape for hundreds and hundreds of years. So all their creativity went into fabric and the design and the weave and the colors and all of that. And it really shows how special each I can go crazy talking about. We could do a whole segment about my silks that I have. They're just luscious to work with and so beautiful.
I had the treasure opportunity to go to Japan almost 2 years ago now, and we worked with a company for a private tour that took us to a reclaimed kimono fabric store. And it actually, unbeknownst to us, because we're not familiar with Japanese holidays, it was on a holiday, but the proprietor agreed to open the shop just for us. So I had the run of the shop with all of this kimono fabric. I could have gone completely nuts. And I forced myself to limit myself to 2 pieces that I brought home. And I have already used one piece, but then we also were able to go to the Kyoto Textile Museum, where I was also able to get a piece there. So I ended up overall coming home with more than those two pieces. But yes,
Right.
the fabric is just luscious. I couldn't agree more.
It is. And when you take apart a kimono, now these are my kimono rolls. So these are still bolts. These were
Okay.
never made into kimonos. These are kimono. And when you take a kimono apart, you end up with rectangles. So it's narrow. It's only about 14 inches wide, but it's unlike Western clothes where you have these odd shapes. So it's a little easier to use to cut and recut for Western clothes.
Yeah. Well, maybe we need to do a segment just on your silks, because I can just imagine how it would be so very much fun.
Yeah.
Speaking of fun, one of my favorite stories, Ann Williamson stories, is about your interaction with Ruth Bader Ginsberg back in 2019 when she bought one of your pieces.
She did.
I've been dying for us to have a moment for you to tell that story. Would you do that?
Yes. It was a fundraiser for the Smithsonian. So it was the Smithsonian Craft Show. And there was a rumor that Ruth Bader Ginsberg was going to come. And I thought, whoa, maybe I'll get to see her. And sure enough, here she comes down the aisle with this entourage of security people, her assistants, and the women from the Women's Committee that were administrating the exhibit, the show. So it was quite a group of people. And she's this tiny little thing. She comes down the aisle. She paused in front of my booth and she looked at a couple things and she said, well, I'll be back. And off they go. And I thought, and anyway, I felt like I was waiting for my boyfriend to come. I was in high school and I was hoping my boyfriend would come back. I was just like, is she still here? Is she going to come back? And sure enough, here they come back down the aisle. And I did my very best to just help a woman who was trying on some different items to see which one she liked best, rather than making a fool of myself. So she'd say, I'd like to try that one on, and may I try this one on? And the security agents were so sweet. They were holding some of her bag, I think. And it was kind of like they were taking grandma shopping. I mean, these big burly guys, and they're just kind of standing there laughing and helping. So anyway, so she tried on a number of pieces and ended up making her choice. And up to this point, I'm hardly talking. I'm just helping. And so we wrapped up the garment and I came over with my iPad because she had to sign her name on it. And as she's signing, I say to her, you must have been paying your bills on time because this went through with no problem. And she sort of looks up at me and then she starts to chuckle because, she's got a good sense of humor, because part of my brain was saying, don't say that, because some elderly ladies wouldn't get the joke. They would be affronted, but she laughed. And she handed me the iPad and I handed her the bag. And then one of the assistants said, do you want to go look at that necklace? And she said, yes. And so off they went to look at the necklace. So it was such a memorable experience and such a special, wonderful event. And I think, she was it for quite a while. The main, I would love to sell something to Michelle Obama, but this was a little different because Ruth Bader Ginsberg was one of the Supreme Court justices. She was one of 9 people making decisions about our government and our country. And so it was really great.
What a treat. What a story. That's definitely one for the memory books. There's no question about that. Oh, well, and I always like to end these chats by asking what's next. Is there some new thing looming that we can be watching for on the Ann Williamson horizon?
So it's so funny you're asking me this, because of course I'm thinking, well, I'm just going to keep making more of these, and I'm going to keep making more of those, and I'm hoping the shows will come back. The first time anyone asked me this, must have been quite a few years ago. A high school kid was, the class was going around asking various businesses and what their plans were, and they said, "What's your 5-year plan?" And I was like, apparently I don't do that. So I just kind of follow my nose, just as I was saying before, it's like, maybe I'm going to try it this way now. People really liked that. I wonder if I could make it so it would accommodate more people. It wasn't just this one shape. It would be fun to try with more little squares all over it, or maybe fewer little squares. So that's kind of the way I've been moving, and it's been keeping me going all these years.
Well, you've certainly had some great success, and you have created more beautiful things than I can count. I know that for sure.
Well, thank you.
It's apparently working for you.
Keeps me happy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I cannot thank you enough for spending time with me today. It has been an absolute delight to hear about you, to hear about your work, to hear about your process. And I'm not going to lie, to hear about your interaction with Ruth Bader Ginsberg, because I've really been looking forward to that. You truly are an inspiring clothing artist, and I suspect a number of our American Sewing Guild viewers will have had their creative juices really charged from hearing our chat today. So thank you.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and I want to thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been great.
Well, until next time, and I certainly hope there is a next time. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.